So here's the question. In the print and packaging supply chain, how do we deliver new ideas and innovative practices to continually improve your profit, your brand, and your quality? Welcome to the GAMUT podcast, and I am your host, Jeff Collins, Director of Print Technologies for Idealliance. We are a nonprofit global think tank serving the graphic communications industry with 12 offices strategically located around the world to better support our membership. You can support the GAMUT podcast and content like this by becoming a member at Idealliance by going to www.idealliance.org. Today's episode is sponsored by Kodak. Kodak is a global technology company focused on print and advanced materials and chemicals. They provide industry-leading hardware, software, consumables, and services primarily to customers in commercial print, packaging, publishing, manufacturing, and entertainment. On today's GAMUT podcast, we're speaking with Jay Kelbley. He is the I1 product manager for X-Rite Pantone, and Jay will discuss the growth in new printing materials like textiles and the new family of iPro 3 products designed to support them. Jay holds a master's degree in fine arts from Rochester Institute of Technology, and before joining X-Rite, Jay has worked with many large OEMs like Kodak, Sony, and Samsung on solutions for color, printing, and camera systems. X-Rite Incorporated is a global leader in the science and technology of color and appearance. With Pantone, X-Rite employs more than 800 people in 11 different countries, and X-Rite offers a full range of solutions used by manufacturers, retailers, printers, photographers, and graphic design houses, as well as brands, to achieve precise management and communication of color and appearance throughout their processes. Jay, good morning. Great to have you on, and looking forward to our discussion today. How are you?
Thanks. Thanks for letting me be on.
Glad to have you on, Jay. And to get started, why don't you share with our listeners a little bit about your background and how you became involved in this side of the industry?
Sure. Well, I started out as a photographer, and while I was getting a master's in photography, I started working for Kodak because I was actually based in Rochester, New York.
Okay.
So I worked on a variety of things, dye sublimation printers, the first professional digital cameras and film scanners that came out, and then eventually ended up at a Kodak spinoff that was doing super high-end industrial cameras and medical cameras and things like that. So we did a lot of optics design work and camera design work.
I see. And you've worked for some pretty large OEMs like Samsung and Sony as well in a similar area as a product manager and marketing manager. And now with X-Rite, how does that experience working with photography and camera systems correlate over to spectrophotometry and the devices that you now support?
Oh, good question. Well, really, spectrophotometers are light measuring devices, a lot like cameras. The difference really is the number of pixels in the device, and in some cases the accuracy. Mm-hmm. But the spectrophotometers do a much better job in dividing up color and giving you much more precise measurement of color. Whereas a camera typically has 3 color sensors, like a colorimeter for RGB. A spectrophotometer splits up all the light into wavelengths, usually in 10 nanometer increments. So giving you 20 or 30 or more measurement points for measuring the color. But a lot of the problems are similar in terms of filtration and how you measure the light and the technical aspects of the sensors that are in there, and gain and managing heat and things like that.
Absolutely. In the area of spectrophotometry and colorimeters and tools to handle process control and to handle color management, we've come quite a long way as far as technology advancement. And the same thing is true for the printing industry. We have amazing new technology that can print on just about anything. We look at inkjet and inkjet to textile, direct to corrugated, and a variety of different new materials. And that obviously presents challenges and new solutions to be able to maintain and really control consistency and color, similar to the way that we've been able to do it with just simple ink on paper.
Yeah, and virtually all of the color management for printing over the last decades has been focused on either toner on paper or ink on paper. And there hasn't been a lot of work in solving for all these new materials that have popped up and these new printing processes that have popped up. I mean, solvent-based printers, latex printers, all the new dye sub printers that are out there.
Dye sub, yeah.
And printing on,
yeah.
And printing on metal and glass and all these crazy new substrates. And so people a lot of times have applied the color management tools and workflows that they had for paper to these new substrates and had some levels of success and failure because they're solving new problems, right? With textiles, there's all these new, there's a whole variety of textile substrates with, first polyesters are rolling out and then, canvas and textured fabrics. And now there's a lot of printing on natural fibers, silks and cottons and wool. And each one of those creates different challenges, right? The frequency of the weave or the texture of the weave is a challenge to measure if you're using a traditional print measurement device because the aperture is so small, it won't give you a good average measurement.
Right.
If you're scanning across textiles, how do you hold them down, right? And how do you manage contamination, right? Things like natural cotton have a lot of loose material that comes off that can change the measurement and potentially can force you to clean your device a lot more frequently than you would with paper or something else. So there's a lot of new things people are trying to solve for there.
And on that note, Jay, what are some of the features or improvements to the technology that can overcome some of the challenges that we just mentioned when we're talking about rough textiles or metallics or shiny surfaces like glass?
Sure. We did a couple of things. One of the big new improvements in the i1 Pro 3s, the whole family, is the addition or change to an LED light source, a full spectrum LED light source. By doing that, removing the tungsten bulb and the UV LEDs that were in there, we can get the single pass scanning. So you get M0, M1, M2 all in one pass without having to go back and do a pass for visible and then a pass for UV. So that makes it easier for material hold down. It cuts your scan times in half because you only have to do half as much scanning. So that's a big piece that we added with those as well. We doubled the scan rate or the sampling rate of the devices. So as you're scanning across, whether it's paper, textile, whatever, the i1s are actually measuring at 200 hertz or 200 measurements per second. Okay. And they're averaging those. And the more those samples you get on one patch and the more you average them, the better, the more accurate measurement you're going to get. So we doubled the scan rate to 400 hertz. So now you can either scan at the same rate you did before and get twice as many samples off a patch automatically, or scan faster, right? And that's another workflow and speed improvement. With the i1 Pro 3s, we really wanted to target the growth in the market, which is in all these new materials and new material printers that are out there. So we created a whole new version of the i1 Pro 3 called the i1 Pro 3 Plus, and it has a much larger aperture. So it has an 8mm aperture instead of a 4.5mm aperture that the original i1 Pro had. Okay. And the advantage of the bigger aperture is it works better on non-standard surfaces like textiles, like ceramics and corrugated. It works better with low resolution prints like you use with grand format, right? So it can give you better homogeneity or better averaging across those in a much more accurate measurement. And another improvement is a very interesting area of graphic arts, and that's displays, large format displays. These are very bright displays that you see in stores or retail environments. And
traditionally there were some challenges and limitations to profiling or measuring those type of conditions.
Yeah, there's a lot of work in the display market now with LFDs. They call them large format displays. So those displays that they have at McDonald's or a fast food restaurant, that are bright in daylight, those will go up to 7,000, 8,000 nits or candela per square meter. Super crazy bright. And there really weren't solutions out there to calibrate those. So we enabled the new i1 family to go up to 5,000 nits, which is much brighter than you'll see on a desktop display monitor. Display monitors that are out there today on a desktop computer go up to, very rarely, but go up to 1,000 or 1,200 nits. Emissive displays like a monitor are a different kind of market and problem than emissive or transmissive backlit materials, which are exploding in the market as well. So you see that with backlit fabrics. If you go to a trade show, you'll see, everything's backlit fabrics now. And a lot of those are done on sublimation printers and some on solvent printers. But we've enabled the new i1 Pro 3 Plus to do emissive or transmissive profiling. So you can take your i1 Pro 3 and hand scan just like you would on paper, but do it on a light box with either backlit film or a backlit fabric and build the same quality of profiles you'd be building with a reflective print.
Who are some of the partners that you work with to integrate the iPro 3 into color management workflows, DFEs, or standalone applications?
So the big hitters like EFI, Caldera, have been working with the SDK for quite a while. ErgoSoft, Fujifilm's new ColorPath sync are all have versions that are up and running and working with the i1 Pro 3 and i1 Pro 3 Plus. But if you want to make sure before you buy, check with your front end manufacturer. But we are working with everybody on front end support, and most of them have been integrated already.
For print service providers and color management workflows, color reproduction, throughout the supply chain from the beginning to the end, that we may have people that are managing the brand that are using instruments. And of course, we may have a variety of different instruments within a particular production facility. And it's important that these instruments are accurate to one another, what we call inter-instrument agreement. And of course, that they're repeatable so that we're not introducing variability or variation through the instrument. And can you talk to us about improvements in this area? Is there an improvement in inter-instrument agreement and repeatability with the new iPro 3 family?
So in general, we've doubled the inter-instrument agreement or tightened it by a factor of 2. Same with repeatability. Repeatability in our testings 0.05 delta E on the i1 Pro 3, which is pretty dang good. Inter-instrument agreement is improved from an average of 0.4 on the i1 Pro 2 to an average of 0.3 delta E's on i1 Pro 3. So we made a significant amount of improvement. A lot of that comes from the new optical design. Some of that comes from as well the new LED cocktail design that's in there. There's better, by taking out the tungsten bulb that was in there, we get a much better thermal management of the device. So there's less heat as it heats up and lights up than there was before. As well, there's less things over the life of the device, like the carbon tungsten burn down you get with a filament based light source that you don't have with LEDs. So a lot of that's attributable to the new LED light source in there.
Often we take the word or the activity maintenance when it comes to spectrophotometers and these devices for granted. If I'm a photographer, I'm always cleaning my lens and I'm checking, and, I have the capability to make sure that I don't have a problem in that area before I shoot. And on the spectrophotometers, I walk into production environments with offset spray powder all over the place, and it's all over the instrument. Don't have the confidence that I would normally have. It was kept in a box and kept very clean. So are there any advantages with the iPro 3 in the area of maintenance?
Yeah, that was a pain point we targeted of the i1 Pro 2 to the i1 Pro 3. So you can open it and check it really easily. You just twist the snout, or the tubus, we call it, off. There's a big locking icons on there for it, and you'll see a big glass filter in there. And if it's dirty, then clean it off. We recommend not necessarily canned air for optical devices, but still air pressure. So if you'd use a hurricane blower, a squeeze bulb blower, like you'd use for a lens, something like that. And if you clean with that, that's great. Sometimes canned air is a little aggressive and abrasive, but sometimes that's what you need to use. Otherwise, a high quality alcohol pad, if you need to contact clean that filter, like Zeiss wipes or something like that as well. But it's really simple to clean these, really easy compared to previous generations.
When we look at measuring lots of patches, obviously a handheld device, that's very time consuming. So we look to solutions that are more automated, like the ISIS Excel and the IO table. And in particular, the IO table, very effective because I can use the instrument as a handheld. So I have my iPro 2 or my iPro 3 now. And then when I want to automate measuring large charts, for profiling or those type of quality assurance activities, sometimes I have, we struggle with materials that aren't rigid, so they're flexible, and then of course I lay them down flat on that IO table, and I have to make sure it's perfectly in alignment and there's no distortion, or I'll incur errors when I'm reading that automatically with the IO table. Are there any improvements or any suggestions, advice that you can give us when we're using, let's say, the IO table and the iPro 3 for something like textiles?
With the IO specifically, we haven't changed the baseboard of the IO at all. It's still a static charged mat that locks down most materials pretty well. If you have a material that doesn't stick to the static mat, or it's for whatever reason, we still recommend tape and taping them down. For textiles, I've been experimenting a lot and doing measurements with just t-shirt frames out of different printer models that'll stretch the fabrics. One of the big improvements we made for the IO is we created a spacer for the arm so that you can get another 23 millimeters of height out of the IO. And that'll let you put in stretch frames, or if you want to, if you have a problematic material, you can adhere it to a board or foam core or some secondary substrate. And this spacer gives you enough room to put a thicker material in a frame and whatever mounting option you want in there, even a light box.
And you guys also ship the device with a kit that comes with a backboard with magnetic strips. Tell me what the use case for that is.
Sure. So with the Plus, with the large aperture device, we expect a lot of customers to be using it with larger material samples. And so the white backer board is a little bit more than double the width of the existing i1 Pro backer board that everybody's used to. But to hold down materials like fabrics or even thin films, we put magnets in the backer board, and we have steel guides that will hold the material down for hand scanning. It's pretty ingenious setup.
Jay, you mentioned earlier the improvement with the iPro 3 family, that we no longer need to do two passes or two scans for a particular measurement mode. So if we look at our measurement modes like M1, M0, M2, and now we have with this new instrument M3 measurement, which is a polarization filter, correct? Talk to us about the advantages and applications of using a polarization filter or M3 measurement mode.
Yeah, we're really excited about the applications that are popping up for M3. The more people use it, the more excited they get about it. There really hasn't been polarization on devices in this price class as far back as I can remember. And we haven't done much with polarization since the Spectralinos, much new with it. But the applications where people are seeing great value in it are beyond where they did before. A lot of people use polarization to look at ink dryback,
right,
and printing. But with this, the guys who are finding a lot of value, photographers, right? If you have a super glossy material paper, like an F-surface photo paper, and you'll get reflections in the shadows. You get speculars in the blacks where you shouldn't from a color standpoint, but that's just the nature of the way these things work. This will knock them down and give you much tighter gamut in your profiles. Makes a huge difference in shadow detail. Glossy materials for textiles makes a huge improvement for textiles like silks and polyesters and the highlights where you get speculars off the weave.
Right.
So there's a lot of people trying this in areas that even we hadn't expected and finding value in M3.
Very interesting. And you've also added a security feature to the new device. Tell us about that.
So we put a Kensington lock port on it. It may seem a little trivial, but in an operation where your device is really assigned to a printer or a workflow, you don't want your device going off to the office. You can actually lock it to a table and still have it usable, so it doesn't walk away. So there's a lot of little improvements in in the whole system here. Like to go with the Kensington lock port on the calibration plaque, when you slide open the calibration plaque, there's 2 holes for drywall screws. So if you want to lock the calibration plaque down to a table, we put screw holes in for it too, because that came back from people a lot of times that someone would take their device, they'd bring it back, and they'd lose the plaque. So we've made a lot of little improvements like that really should help people in small but important ways.
When we look at recertifying devices, these are critical instruments for our value that we provide to our customers, and we ensure consistency and quality. And typically we will audit facilities, whether we're doing a brand Q audit or we're doing a pre-site check prior to a G7 master qualification, as well as ISO activities, ISO 9001 and things like that. And we need to have certificate of analysis and certified documentation showing that the instrument is checked and it's done routinely. Same process with sending the instrument back to X-Rite to have it recertified.
We recommend recertification of every critical color device at least once a year. With the I1s, historically, they've been so stable that, I think with most customers, if they go 2 years before a recert, they're probably going to stay in very consistent, good shape. We now do recertification of the i1 Pro 3s regionally. Before, if you wanted your same device back, we'd have to go all the way back to the factory. So if you're in the U.S. and you want to get it recertified, it would come to our headquarters in Michigan, get recertified. If you're in Europe, it would go to our European headquarters in Switzerland and get recertified, which is kind of cool. So it's a much shorter, easier process for recertification now.
I'm glad to hear that the process of recertification has been improved. It's typically a pain point whenever we walk in to do an assessment or an audit and we find instruments that have not been recertified for many years. And to close the podcast out, if I'm a current user of some of the older models like the iPro 2 or the iPro 1, is there any incentives or any trade-in programs that are in place to upgrade to the new solution, the iPro 3?
Sure. Yeah. In most of the world, we have a trade-in program running. So for US and Europe, and you would buy your new i1 Pro 3 and then fill out the paperwork and send in your original i1 or i1 Pro 2, and we give you a rebate back after the purchase. Same with the IO. And that's very simply up at xritetradein.com.
Excellent conversation, Jay. I really appreciate your time. And again, for our listeners, if you're interested in trading in your older i1 Pros or your iPro 2, just go to xritepantone.com. Jay, thanks so much again, and look forward to talking to you in the future. Take care.
Thanks, Jeff. This has been really great, and it's been fun. Thanks.
Thanks for listening to the GAMUT podcast. If you have ideas, suggestions, or would like to join us or even sponsor future podcasts, simply email me at jcollins@idealliance.org. That's JCOLLINS at idealliance.org. Take care and have a productive day.